Hello and most welcome to 1754 of the series. Heidegger 1754. There are reported that the audio is not quite as good, so I beg for your patience. We will today continue with Stephen G. Affeldt's article, Captivating Pictures and Liberating Language. Recording resumed. Last time it was a bit short, only a whopping 2 pages. So we are just starting to get into it. But one interesting quote was on page 258. Where language suggests a body and there is none, there we should like to say is a spirit. And it's an indication that we discussed our tendency to fill out things when they are not due, to ask questions when they have no purpose, can construct things that doesn't have a purpose, so to speak, in that language game, not participatory or having no use. I think, Kalle, you wanted to show the author here. Please go ahead. Stephen Affeldt. Yes. How they may be redemptive, possessed of the power to inspire, inform, and effect liberating transformations of both individuals and societies. The redemptive feature is important. We discussed earlier on that filling out, so to speak, grammatical holes in the sentences can lead to hypothesizing things that do not exist. And then the whole circus begins. Consciousness is most definitely one of those things that get a reality. And once the reality is established, it is very hard to get rid of. It will have its influence. Yes, 109, that philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language. Our intelligence makes us look at what Wittgenstein usually calls superficial structures of language. And therein begins the mistakes. I think we can continue the read where we left off, the very last paragraph on page 258. If one adopts this first reading of Wittgenstein's remark, it will be clear, at least in outline, what it means to say that our intelligence is bewitched and how philosophy may battle against that bewitchment. To say that our intelligence is bewitched Oh yeah, thank you, Kalle. I do beg your pardon. I was awoken a bit late today. The correct ending point is to the end of the second paragraph on page 260. Thank you, Kalle. After the word reflect, that's exactly, very good. That is also the point where we found this little article by Goldfarb, which I have printed out and read to some extent. So we continue here, and what we discussed earlier in 1752 was that these filling out of perceived empty holes in the grammatical text leads to human fantasies, cravings, dissatisfactions, and confusion. The work is redemptive. Therefore, while Wittgenstein illustrates expressions of this drive and their consequences as they manifest themselves in forms of philosophy, he is not addressing a specific malady of a narrowly circumscribed group, and his redemptive ambitions will be directed beyond the task of liberating professional philosophers from the various darknesses into which they cast themselves. These claims will be more fully developed and supported throughout the course of this essay. I would like, however, to mention a third reason for my resisting the first reading of Wittgenstein's remark at paragraph 109, and for adopting the second as informing my conception of the redemptive work philosophical investigations. It seems to me that Frege and Carnap and certainly early Wittgenstein, arguably, and Austin, and in certain moments, harbored the hope that a sufficiently accurate appreciation of the details of the workings of our language would completely banish the bewitchments of our intelligence. However, I do not see that the later Wittgenstein harbored any such hope for a full and final peace. Rather, insofar as he is concerned, to show that human beings are possessed of a continuous drive to bewitch themselves. His philosophical practice must itself be understood as a necessarily continuous battle against this drive. That is, I take it, that part of what we are meant to learn from the 693 sections of part one of the investigations is that there are no limits to the ways in which we can bewitch ourselves. We are shown in these sections that we do so continuously upon stopping to take thought and in hundreds of apparently unremarkable ways and moments. Accordingly, our recovery to ourselves must also be continuous, and the work of hundreds of otherwise unremarkable moments of recovered sense. We might say that Wittgenstein accepts the message of the pun in the title of Kant's essay on perceptual space. Namely, if a full and final peace is ever to be found, it is found only in death. captivating pictures. In the remainder of this essay, I will be elaborating one instance of what I understand to be the redemptive work which is being conducted within the details of philosophical investigations. In particular, I will be focusing on a small range of Wittgenstein's remarks about relations between pictures and language, and about the wish to find in a certain conception of pictures a model for the working of language. I will be developing through these remarks one line of thought about how and why we bewitch our own intelligence, and about how Wittgenstein's philosophical practice may be understood to battle this bewitchment. At paragraph 115, Wittgenstein has this: a picture held us captive, and we could not get outside of it, for it lay in our language, and language seemed to repeat it to us inexorably. This passage raises a number of immediate questions. Perhaps most immediately, it raises questions about what Wittgenstein means by a picture, what it means to say that the picture lay in our language, and how we are to understand the striking idea that language repeats a picture to us. I will return to each of these questions in due course. However, putting them to one side for the moment, this passage offers a reasonably clear instance of something that might be thought of as a bewitched intelligence. Whatever exactly Wittgenstein means in speaking of being held by a picture, there's a clear suggestion that our intelligence is somehow taken hold of and thwarted by the picture. we are unable to free ourselves from the picture, to get outside of it, and to think in any terms other than those which the picture seems to offer. Even though this passage provides a reasonably clear instance of a bewitched intelligence, it may nevertheless seem to be a poor passage for my purposes, for it can seem clearly to invite and to support what I have been calling the first reading of Wittgenstein's remark about philosophy, and the battle against the bewitchment of our intelligence by means of language. It can seem clearly to suggest that it is simply a fact about our language that there is a picture, whatever it turns out to be, lying in it, and that it is precisely this fact about our language which is responsible for the bewitchment of our intelligence. We are held captive just by this picture precisely because it is lying in our language. However much we try to get outside of it, we inevitably encounter language repeating this picture to us inexorably. Any attempt to escape is thwarted by language itself. I have begun with this passage in part precisely because it can readily seem to suggest this view. Indeed, together with passages such as paragraph 191, in which Wittgenstein speaks of philosophical confusion as the result of crossing of different pictures. This passage might be thought of as among the strongest sources of support for a purportedly general Wittgensteinian lesson about the philosophical deceptiveness of certain of our forms of language, and for a general Wittgensteinian warning about the philosophical dangers of what he calls pictures. Further, understood in the manner which I have sketched, this passage may well suggest that for Wittgenstein, the liberation of our intelligence will depend upon completely eliminating pictures from our language. We can go up a bit. Thank you. However, I do not believe that this passage supports either the line of interpretation that I have just sketched, or the general conclusions that may be drawn from that interpretation. Indeed, I do not believe that Wittgenstein harbors any wholesale antipathy towards pictures. The term picture, or German Bild, is recurrent throughout philosophical investigations and is one of the budget of terms of description and of criticism that Wittgenstein's work has added to our philosophical lexicon. It is important to recall, however, that this term is not used in any single sense throughout the investigations, and that it is not invariably used as a term of criticism or to suggest a site of philosophical confusion. The following few instances may serve as reminders of the range of this term and of the range of Wittgenstein's attitudes toward pictures. The term picture first occurs quite causally in paragraph 1 of the investigations. Immediately following the opening short quotation from the Confessions, in which Augustine recounts his memory of learning language. Wittgenstein remarks, In these words, it seems to me, we find a particular picture of the essence of human language. Here Wittgenstein apparently uses the term picture simply to designate a general or perhaps sketchy account that we might provide of some matter. Go up, please. Thanks. Such a general and sketchy account may, of course, lead to confusion if it is mistakenly taken to represent or is pressed into philosophical service as a complete and fully accurate account in this instance of language or of the essence of language. However, there's no suggestion here that this picture is inherently misleading or that it is simply lying in our language, waiting to capture our intelligence and to lead us into confusion. In other instances, Wittgenstein uses the term picture quite literally to speak of various types of drawings, paintings, and images. There's a picture of a boxer, picture of an old man walking up a steep path, a portrait and a genre painting, two pictures of a rose in the dark, a picture of a machine used to symbolize a particular action of the machine, and the like. We might also include as related to this class of instances Wittgenstein's remark that the human body is the best picture of the human soul. I will return to some of these passages below. However, in this class of instances too, while we may be misled in our thinking by imagining that the functioning of these pictures is more clear and direct than it actually is. Such pictures do not lie in our language, nor are they inherently misleading. They are simply pictures. In a third class of instances, Wittgenstein uses the term picture in connection with elements of what might be called a mythology of ourselves and of certain phenomena which have become quite natural to us. This is the sense of the term in Wittgenstein asking if the picture of thought in the head can force itself upon us, then why not much more that of thought in the soul? It is also the sense of the term in his inviting us to think of the picture of blindness as darkness in the soul. Or in the head of the blind man. Furthermore, while Wittgenstein does not explicitly use the term picture when he suggests the image of a rule as a visible section of rails invisibly laid to infinity. This sense of a picture as part of natural mythology seems to be at work in this instance as well. These kinds of cases perhaps more closely approach the sense of the term involved in the idea that a picture holds us captive. One might not want to suggest that such pictures lie in our language, however, insofar as these pictures have become part of a natural mythology. They do exert a kind of force on our thought and imagination. Further, while we are not likely to simply forget that these pictures are, as Wittgenstein says at paragraph 221, mythological descriptions, he does suggest that their naturalness to us and their imagistic vividness may mislead us. Wittgenstein remarks that a picture is in the foreground, but the sense lies far in the background. That is, the application of the picture is not easy to survey. These pictures come to the foreground in our thinking and may either provide an illusion of clarity about the nature of various phenomena or misdirect inquiry into the nature of those phenomena. However, even in these cases, Wittgenstein does not seek to eliminate such pictures. On the contrary, he says of them, the picture is there, and I am not disputing its validity in any particular case. Only I also want to understand the application of the picture. With these reminders in place, I want to return to paragraph 115. A picture held us captive, and we could not get outside of it, for it lay in our language, and language seemed to repeat it to us inexorably. Closer attention to the complexities of this passage within its context will allow us to appreciate that it does not support the line of interpretation I sketched above, and will take us some considerable distance in the beginning to understand at least one of Wittgenstein's accounts of the way in which and the reasons why we bewitch our intelligence. In first introducing paragraph 115, I noted its striking image of language repeating a picture to us inexorably. I will have more to say about this feature of the passage shortly. But in order to begin considering this passage more fully, I want to note that the image of repetition is part of what serves to establish the linkage between this passage and those which immediately precede it. In paragraphs 113 to 114, we have the following. But this is how it is. I say to myself over and over again. I feel as though if only I could fix my gaze absolutely sharply on this fact, get it in focus, I must grasp the essence of the matter. From TLP 45, the general form of proposition is, this is how things are. That is the kind of proposition that one repeats to oneself countless times. One thinks that one is tracing the outline of the thing's nature over and over again, and one is merely tracing round the frame through which we look at it. Central as the evident images of repetition are in these passages, the linkage between paragraph 115 and paragraphs 113 to 114 is not exhausted by them. Visual images are equally prominent in paragraphs 113 to 14. In paragraph 113, we have the idea of trying to fix our gaze absolutely sharply on a fact of this, and of trying to get the supposed fact in focus. We have, and in 114, we have the non-less explicitly visual image of tracing around the frame through which we look at something further, and importantly, in paragraphs 113 to 14. Together, we are presented with a very close alignment, if not an identification of the ideas of a fact, a proposition, and a picture. Accordingly, the idea of the repetition of a picture which first appears explicitly in paragraph 115 is already implicitly present in paragraphs 113 to 14. That is, in saying to ourselves over and over again that this is how it is, as well as in repeating countless times that the general form of proposition is, this is how things are. We are in effect incessantly repeating a picture of the nature of language. Locating paragraph 115 in the context of these two preceding passages allows us to recognize that it contains a number of closely connected and quite pivotal reversals. In paragraphs 113 to 14, I produce for myself a picture of the nature of language, and I repeat this picture to myself over and over. Indeed, my repetition of the picture is depicted as an integral part of my effort to produce the picture for myself. It is part of my effort to bring the picture before myself, to get it in focus and to fix my gaze upon it absolutely sharply. Further, the fact that I must repeat the picture over and over suggests that I encounter some difficulty in bringing the picture into clear focus and in fixing my gaze on it absolutely sharply. And the fact that I encounter this difficulty in turn suggests that the picture I'm working to produce for myself is neither stable nor simply given. It is not simply present before me. This picture, then, is importantly unlike, for example, the picture of thought in the head, or the picture of blindness as darkness in the soul, or in the head of a blind man, or even the picture of a rule as a visible selection of rails invisibly laid to infinity. These pictures are in some sense natural to us. Wittgenstein says they are there in the foreground, and that they can force themselves upon us. With respect to the picture in paragraphs 113 to 14, however, a continuous effort on my part is required to conjure the picture into being and into focus. The picture is apparently not naturally in the foreground, forcing itself upon me. It seems rather that I must force the picture into being. And with that great sentence, it's a perfect stop of 1754. Sometimes one wants to start with the last sentence because it sort of sums all the other things. But important, we know that we are on page 265. Thank you, Kalle. And the last word there is into being. So we are the ones forcing ourselves to the picture. The picture doesn't have the power to do that. And can I relate to this? Yes. I've done it many times before. It's something tempting out there, and I think the best quote here is from where Wittgenstein himself was captivated in the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. But I take some other quotes before that. We go to page 261. Please. And in the first paragraph, 6 lines down, I think there is an important thing. Is that there are no limits to the ways in which we bewitch ourselves. It's extensive. And I don't agree, though, with the last rather morbid sentence that only in a full and final peace is to be found. It's in death. Far from it. There's a lot of liberation to be made. We then go to page 262, first paragraph, 7 lines down. And here is the tricky thing here. Here it says we are held captive by this picture precisely because it's lying in our language. It's a conundrum. It is inside our language. This is not something that can be separated and easily treated. No, it is within language, and that is a big part of the problem. So by the same token that we try to find the problem, we have in the medicine, we have the problem itself, that is in language. That is captured by the sentence, we inevitably encounter language repeating this picture to us inexorably. Any attempt to escape is thwarted by language itself. So that is a part of the problem, not unsolvable. Wittgenstein made it, but it's important to know about. And we have one pointer to the solution in the next page. It's an accident because Affeldt wants to speak about picture, but I think in this example at the end of the second paragraph, if you count the first lines as a paragraph, we might also include, as related to this class of instances, Wittgenstein's remark that the human body is the best picture of the soul. I think within the human body, it's more soul-like, and it's also less captivated by the picture. Further down on page 263, in the penultimate paragraph after paragraph 221, it says, a bit up, yeah. Mythological descriptions, he does suggest that they're naturalness to us and their imagistic vividness may mislead us. They have become since generations and millennia natural to us. And they have an imaginative power that sort of captures us. That magic, that shine. Of course, it was that very same shine that captured the philosophers, thinkers, revolutionaries in the age of enlightenment. No doubt. It's tempting. So there are many uses of the word picture, and not all of them are alike at all. When we go to page 264, here we have a good clue when Wittgenstein himself was deeply captured. It's the two quotes that will be after the second paragraph. But this is how it is coming from philosophical investigations. I say to myself over and over again, I feel as though if I could only fix my gaze absolutely sharply on this fact, get it in focus, I must grasp the essence of the matter. And how did this sound when he wrote it himself many years before, during the Great War? The general form of propositions is, this is how things are. That is the kind of proposition that one repeats to oneself countless times. One thinks that one is tracing the outline of the thing's nature over and over again, and one is merely tracing round the frame through which we look at it. And this is just excellent because it's both a pointer to how we get fixated and how Wittgenstein also did it. Kill two flies in one go. And the gaze, I think, is very important. It is not the body gazing or the eyes gazing and actually giving literal myopia and the need for glasses. That's part of it, most definitely. Further down, because these are visual things, and that's why we try to sharpen our gaze even when we read, even if there are no pictures or images present. We try to read as if it were a picture. And the third line there in paragraph 113, we have the idea of trying to fix our gaze absolutely sharply on a fact, on this, and of trying to get this supposed fact into focus. And let me put in there, isolate, put it under incubation glass, make it completely forehand, and so on and so on. It should be clear in the laboratory, and you should evict your own subjective and so on. Take away the observer. Become Bernard or Jacques Monod, some of those people. Erase yourself, just sharpen your gaze until you will suffer from chronic myopia. At the end of that paragraph, we have the incessant repeating. The general form of propositions is, this is how things are, but, I would add there, my but, we are in effect incessantly repeating a picture of the nature of language. And then finally, what I like the most, next page, the last sentence I read. It seems rather The picture is apparently not naturally in the foreground. Listen to this, forcing itself upon me. It seems rather that I must force the picture into being. So we are complicit in the act of erasing ourselves. The fixation of Jacques Monod, Bernard, is their own. That actually, in a way, makes them more subjective. But this convolutes the problem, and this is problematic. This is one of the toughest things, is the picture. Where does it reside? How does it befalls us? So the best way I recommend is to go into yourself, or why not others, to see how they fixate on something. Kalle had an excellent suggestion a couple of years ago from Jehovah's Witnesses that were fixated on the word truth. Have you seen the truth? They said even. You can correct me when you come in later here. The fixation in logic, as I recall, was often identity and a word so mysterious. This is true in itself, without any reality. Those fixations are stemming from a, how could I put this? A similar picture, but don't think of the picture as identical. There's some family similarity. Think of an extended family with cousins, brothers-in-laws, aunts that married into the family, and children that came in through new marriages, and so on. They are all part of the family, but not necessarily sharing identity, even to the smallest extent. Kalle, please come in.
I love this paper by Stephen Affeldt. It gave many new insights. I will mention one disagreement with him and one agreement. And sometimes disagreements are good because they give you insight. And so here I will go to page 257 that we had in the previous lecture. We need it in order to get the point. Page 257. So it's the quotation from paragraph 109. This is one of the most significant ones in this paper, because Affeldt dedicates many pages on commenting it. So philosophy is a battle against the bewitchment of intelligence by means of language. And now he gave two explanations to this phrase. The first is, language is the means of the bewitchment of our intelligence, and philosophy is a battle against that bewitchment. And there is a second explanation. Philosophy is the battle by means of language against the bewitchment of our intelligence. So this second interpretation gives a more positive view of language. Here, language is more like an enemy. And then let's go to page 260. What is Affeldt's own preference to these two options? 260. We have it in this, and in this paragraph, I would like, however, to mention a third reason for my resisting the first reading of Wittgenstein's remark at paragraph 109, and for adopting second as informing my conception of the relative work of philosophical investigations. Affeldt has a very positive, he thinks that Wittgenstein has a very positive view of language. Myself, my own position is that Wittgenstein was intentionally ambiguous here, that he is both for language and against it. So neither interpretation is better than the other. Language is in fact both a friend, but also an enemy. So there is no better or worse interpretation of this. And so here is my slight disagreement with Professor Affeldt. Would you agree with me, Hans, or disagree?
It's a bit early on here in the text, but what you say makes sense. And I also see my take on it. It seems to make sense also according to the text Affeldt wrote, because it's indicating that there are traps in language, but it's also us that voluntarily, so to speak, choose to pinpoint those things. And I can associate to that, and I can associate to the Wittgenstein of Tractatus. Not that I'm comparing myself to Wittgenstein, but I can get into that mode of trying to focus, having the idea that there is one proposition, and of course, because of me, language will work as an enemy, and that could be the reason, as you so eloquently say, Kalle, that some people actually turn against language.
Like Plato.
Yeah, Plato and friends of mine who says we can't trust language. And Rousseau, for instance, a good example. Also Plato, yeah. Language, because I think they probably felt the limitations that came from the misunderstandings, as Affeldt / Wittgenstein calls them, and they got unhappy with language and tried to escape it. And that might not be the solution or the best solution.
Absolutely. Let me go to the second part of today's lecture. It was about pictures. And here I agree completely with Affeldt. Let me see. The quotation from Wittgenstein. It was on the next page, I believe. Yes, here. So this you read it already, but let me take it again. I say to myself over and over again, I feel as though if only I could fix my gaze absolutely sharply on this fact and get it in focus, I must grasp the essence of the matter. So first time I read this today, I thought, Wittgenstein is here an essentialist.
Yeah.
He is not an essentialist, but if you read it in isolation, in first superficial reading that was mine, you could get the impression that Wittgenstein was an essentialist, like Plato. And then, thanks to this commentary by Affeldt, but also thanks to your comments, Hans, I understood it in other way. So Wittgenstein is not schizophrenic. He has not become essentialist here. Instead is actually point out, Hans, that he emphasizes the importance of the gaze. That is, as you mentioned, Hans, with the metaphor from the laboratory. There you put the scientist puts the object in a box and then looks it from the distance, so to say, from what do you call it? Not telescope, but what is it called? These instruments that they have.
Microscope.
Yes, thank you. Microscope, of course.
Yeah.
And so this is, and they forget that you actually need the scientist there. You need the observer, the scientist. That is the point.
The scientist is forgotten. All the knowledge of the scientist and all his skills are forgotten. And in the end, you're left with a microscope.
Yes, absolutely. And so in this way, you could also, if we go back to the rabbit and duck image, okay, you have, before you gaze sharply, you have two images, that is duck and the rabbit. Both are possible, but it's only when you focus sharply, you get the both options. But both images are true. They are not less true.
Very good, very good. Hooray, yeah.
So this is very quantum physical, this sentence. So you have, okay, in superposition, you have many, you are not in focus. You see 2, 3 images, let's say rabbit and duck, but only when you focus, you see only one image. That is, let's say, a duck. And let me finish my comments. Yes, I love also this phrase, as you did, Hans, this concluding phrase by Affeldt. And I think Affeldt actually needs deserves applauses for this phrase, these two phrases. The picture is apparently not natural in the foreground, forcing itself upon me. It seems rather that I must force the picture into being.
Yeah.
Great.
It is absolutely great. And I think it's so true because in my own life experience, I think it could be helpful to think, how did you feel about these things yourself? And this is an odd coincidence. When I was convinced of something, I was in my late teens. One of the phrases that actually convinced me more than anything else was, if I remember it correctly, it was, be like a scientist and just use a microscope and objectively look.
Yes.
I'm not kidding. It was that to the words that was used. And of course, I, as the author who influenced me gravely, and myself, we both had the same, and I would say similar problem, not identical, but similar.
There was some footnotes that we could look up that belong to this part, like footnote 11. Let me see footnote 11. Let me see where was the reference here. 12 is there. Let me see. 11 was perhaps. Yes. This about Kant's essay on perpetual peace. If a full and final peace is ever to be found, it is found only in death. Please check out footnote 11. I think
those are one of the things I don't agree about. That's way too morbid, and I think it's not to the fact.
Let me see my document. Let me see what we're reading. Footnote 11. I take this claim about the title of Kant's essay from Hannah Arendt, Lectures on Kant's Political Philosophy. And there are other footnotes, but I don't think that they.
Hannah Arendt, yes, Heidegger's fiance for a while, if I don't misremember.
Yes, secret lawyer. Here you see Stanley Cavell, and he is a specialist. Stephen Affeldt is a specialist of Stephen Cavell. I must admit my ignorance about this Stephen Cavell. Let us look it up. Stephen Cavell.
One
Stephen Cavell.
view too many. You got one
Yes.
view too many there.
This is no. This is an actor.
He's mighty funny, that actor, though, Stephen Carell.
Let me see. Did I Stephen Cavell? Who is Stephen Cavell? Did I spell it correctly? Stanley Cavell. Oi. Stanley Cavell. Philosopher. Was an American philosopher.
And he was born Goldstein, so he has more in common with Goldfarb.
Yes, as I remember now this, we have looked into Cavell earlier, but only in the very quickly. I don't remember the context. I think it was last summer. So this must be a posthumous publication, here and there, Sites of Philosophy.
Okay.
Cavell on film. Okay. Perhaps we should say something by him later on.
We can do that, yeah.
So his latest publication seems to be on Cavell, at least on this page.
I've been reading his friend there, or colleague, Goldfarb's I Want You to Bring Me a Slab. It's quite good, actually.
Yes, a second reference to Goldfarb.
Yeah, he's there as well. So they probably know each other. Well, what do you say, Kalle? Should we?
Yes, perhaps we should end there.
Well, thank you very much for your excellent commentaries, Kalle. And thank you all for listening in. Sorry about the introducing bad sound quality. I hope that regulated itself. Have a very pleasant morning, day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Bye bye for now.